I'm going to get us started, and really warm welcome to everybody who's here. I see some familiar names. I see some past students. I see some of our trainers and people we've worked with on the list. So just a shout out to all of you for being here. Thank you so much for showing up, taking the time, and just spending a little time thinking about these topics and thinking about the topic of, in this webinar, regulatory issues and insurance and business practices and things around the practice of psilocybin facilitation in state regulated environments, which is really going to be our topic today. So for those of you I have not yet met, or those of you who I have not yet had a chance to introduce myself to, my name is Elizabeth Nielson. I am the co-founder of Fluence. I'm the chief visionary officer, so I do a lot of business leadership stuff and program leadership stuff. And I love to run these webinars because I get to bring in guests from the community of usually other organizations that we work with or we have some sort of relationship with at Fluence, who can help inform you all and the rest of our audience at Fluence about topics that are going to be really, really important for your practice and for your professional development. So this is a really informal conversation. Britt Rollins, our guest today, is joining us from Portland, Oregon, and we're very excited to have him here. I'll give just a minute of background on our relationship. Britt and I met actually in Portland. I think it was 2020 or 2021. It was definitely sort of in that pandemic phase, and it was after Oregon had voted to create a psilocybin facilitation program, but had not yet launched it. So the regulations were being written. Everybody was trying to figure out how they were going to meet the needs of this new field that had we knew it was going to happen, but we didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. So we began our chats as I was beginning to think about creating and bringing our existing training program for clinicians in the psychedelics field to Oregon in a way that could facilitate the training and licensure of licensed facilitators. Fluence was already well established as a training program with continuing education programs for clinicians. We were also well established as a training program for clinical research trials. So we train clinicians to do work in research studies of psychedelics all across the world, actually. But the state model was something really new for us. It was new for everyone. And so Britt and I had a number of conversations that really helped us figure out how we could take our existing experience and knowledge and bring it into this environment. And we worked together, informally, just advising each other and helping each other out over the course of this time period. And we did have a training program there, ran for 2 years. We were one of the first to be licensed. We've had some wonderful success stories of our graduates getting into practice. And actually, if you look at last month's webinar with Kaylee Howard, was just a beautiful example of that and her work. But today we're looking forward to Colorado. Those of you who have been following the field know that Colorado's Natural Medicine Health Act has a pathway for people who are clinicians to become licensed facilitators, clinical facilitators that recognizes that license and allows them to work with both of those licenses simultaneously. And so we're really excited about this possibility. So at Fluence, we're actually moving our program over to Colorado to be a Colorado-based program. That's quite a process. It's a big transition, but we have submitted an application to the state of Colorado. We're not yet approved, but I assume that some of you are here because you may be interested in that. So we will give you as much information as we can about that. So my role here really is as a moderator and an interviewer, and to welcome all of you. I'd like to start by asking everyone if you would be so kind as to introduce yourselves in the chat. You could just say your name and where you're dialing in from, zooming in from. That would be lovely to see. Just who's in the room with us. And for those that are joining later, you're going to be watching the recording. We hope you find this helpful as well. And please, everyone who is here, if you have questions, please use the Q&A function. Britt and I will dig through those questions, and we will, paraphrase and answer as many as we can live today. But if you have a question that you're kind of like, maybe I should ask, maybe not, maybe ask it so that if somebody who isn't here live to ask it would have had the same question, you'll have asked it, and then they will get to hear the answer because you were generous enough to type it in the box and give it to us so that we could answer it. Okay. So please participate in that way. We really appreciate it. And like all of our programs, we're glad you're here, and we welcome you to come back for more in the future. Britt, I would love to hear you introduce yourself to this lovely group we've got today and say a little more about your background and your role.
Yeah. Thanks, Elizabeth, for having me on. Hi, everyone. My name is Britt Rollins. I am the co-founder of the National Psychedelics Association, the NPA as for short. We are a professional association for licensed or licensees of state-regulated psychedelic assisted care practices. So here in Oregon and soon to be Colorado, our goal is to really support and provide the business solutions and the business services required of these licensees due to the Schedule I nature. I am not a drug advocate by nature. It has not been always my background. I spent 20 years in pharmaceutical marketing and advertising focused on psychotropic medications. So everything from schizophrenia to bipolar, MDD, treatment-resistant depression, anxiety. Built my career on mental health and treating mental health. And for the, I see in the chat, it's the National Psychedelics Association for Nicole in the chat. However, spending 20 years in pharmaceutical marketing was not my only foray into mental health. I have actually been part of the mental health system since the age of 8, where I first started seeing psychiatrists. My journey was long, and many of the drugs that I was pushing through marketing was also medications that I had taken, and they hadn't worked for me. And it wasn't up until 2016 when I finally was introduced to the idea of underground psychedelic assisted therapy. And coming from West Texas, I thought, that went against all of the things I'd been taught. Nancy Reagan said, "Oh, it will fry my brain," right? And I believed it. And so it took quite a while for me to come to terms with the idea of using a psychedelic for my mental health. I will say that once I did go through a few courses of treatment with MDMA and psilocybin, changed my life in so many ways that I realized a lot of my skills could be applied to the psychedelic sector that I had been working on in the pharmaceutical industry. And so in 2019, my co-founder and I, Chris Olson, came together with the idea that there will be a market in the future in which psychedelics are being dispensed both medically and for adult use, and there needs to be a association for those licensees such that way not only can they get the resources they need, they can learn and grow together. And so that was the impetus for the National Psychedelics Association. We are focused on state markets and the provision of psychedelic assisted care in state markets, and really excited to be talking about that today.
Great. Thanks, Britt. I really appreciate you, sharing that that background. And there's a long-standing sort of reference in the field about the pharma refugees, people coming over from big pharma work experience and coming over to work in the psychedelics field. And we've seen a trend, and I think that experience is really it's really appreciated because it can help us understand and inform what this field needs and how the systems can be navigated, right? How the systems work and how they can be navigated. So I wanted to start just by asking you if you could talk a little bit more about NPA and the structure, parts, and like, what is NPA? What does it do? Who's it for? Like broad strokes overview, and then we can dig into some of the more specifics in the state models.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things coming out of the gate that we recognized were there were going to be business services and solutions that are not available due to the Schedule I nature of psilocybin. This includes everything from banking to insurance, merchant services, which means taking credit cards or ATM. All of these pieces were really just out of reach for psilocybin licensees due to major operations not wanting to participate in a federally illegal market. And so what that means is a lot of the operators in the space would have to basically take cash and or go uninsured or not be able to use credit cards. And we recognize that that would be a major deterrent for navigating this space. So we set out by forming relationships with a national bank, First Citizens Bank, and have set up a program with MPA to offer banking solutions to this market. We've also been working with a number of merchant services to allow for the provision of credit cards and ATM cards for the purchase of these services. Those are really important pieces, Elizabeth, because without it, we'd be looking at individuals having to pay $1,500, $2,000 out of pocket in cash for accepting these services. And we know that that's a threshold way too high for most. And so out of the gate, NPA realized first, we need to find bankers and banks that will help establish this sector. And then we need to find avenues for clients to be able to pay for these without having to look at large sums of cash being handed out over the counter. And so pulling in MPA, first started looking at banking and then merchant services. And then where we're focused now is really what are the other components of psychedelic assisted care, psilocybin services that we can help ensure their not only legitimacy, but also the safety and ensure that these programs are meeting the needs of the folks they're serving. And so with that, we partnered with Homecoming Health. They are a clinical practice and compliance management platform that will assist with not only the scheduling and the recruitment of clients, but will also help with the data management of their journey as they go through these services. That's really important for places like Oregon, who are going to be requiring this starting in January, and Colorado when they open, and they'll be requiring the data capture against the client services. And so what that means is through MPA, we are really looking to provide the business tools and solutions that licensees need to be successful in their practice. And that can look like a lot of things, but what we try to do is provide our members with the services they need that they couldn't get elsewhere, the services that are otherwise not provided due to the Schedule I nature of the substances being deployed.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I know you have several types of memberships, right? You have organization memberships, and then you have individual facilitator memberships, right?
Yeah.
And do you have memberships for people who are say I'm a licensed clinician and I just work with ketamine, but I still need access to some of your resources because insurance is complicated or, billing is complicated, those sorts of things?
Yeah, well, right now we are looking specifically at those who are participating in state regulated markets. So that is Oregon's Measure 109 and the Psilocybin Services Program, as well as Colorado's Natural Medicine Health Act, that will be allowing for psychedelic medicines to be used outside of the traditional medical model. We are looking at future classes of members that will include clinicians that are participating in ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. However, at this time, our main focus is on providing the services for those who are in the state markets and are providing for providing care under the state licensees. That's really important because a lot of although there are issues and areas of ketamine that could be covered by a lot of our work, we really feel that our focus needs to start with those who are operating in this space because of the Schedule I nature of psilocybin and psychedelics. We do, however, have member types. So within our membership, it's for facilitators, service centers, and manufacturers. So any of the licenses in the state markets, we have a category of membership. And that's because a lot of our services and solutions cover the entire gamut of licensees in the state markets.
Great. It would be helpful to hear a little more about your experience in Oregon. I know you've got a number of service centers signed up. Are there and facilitators as well? Are there sort of lessons learned or things that you think would be helpful for folks thinking of starting a business in Colorado, either as a facilitator, as a service center, or as a anything that's in this industry that folks might want to know based on the experience in the last couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Oregon has been a great experiment, and it's been a really great system. At this point, I think there's been nearly 7,000 individuals who've been served with very few of the issues that I think a lot of people fear associated with it. So within Oregon, we've seen 7,000 go through, and I believe there's only been like 4 medical interventions. And so what that means is we've really set up a program here that is safe and that does have the ability to care for those large number of folks who are looking to seek these services. In Oregon, one of the things that I think we found most surprising, though, was at the very beginning of the market opening, we saw a huge influx of individuals who are seeking these services. And I think that's due to earned media and the national attention put on this novel program. However, one thing that I think everybody should recognize is we have a "if you build it, will they come" type of mentality here. And we really need, what we found is that out of all of the areas that really could be improved upon in Oregon and will be important for Colorado, is creating awareness of these programs, letting individuals know that these services are available to them. Because I think that really out of the gate, there's a lot of folks who are seeking psilocybin services, but those are individuals who are usually already seeking additional medications for their mental health treatments. And so they're out there looking for these proactively. And what we saw in Oregon over time was we saw this dip in the number of individuals seeking these services and clients looking for these services due to the fact that there hasn't been a great push for awareness. And so one of the things MPA is going to be doing both for Oregon and Colorado is helping create an awareness campaign to drive individuals to a directory for the provisioners of psychedelic assisted care in Oregon and Colorado, such that way more folks know about these services and can be made aware of them. So that way we don't see this kind of drop off after the first year or so of services where the earned media has tapered off. Another area that I think is really of import that we've learned over time within Oregon is that, I think an area of care where we're seeing folks kind of lean into is, what does integration look like on the back end, and how are we allowing for individuals to have ongoing care when there's only one, the regulations don't require ongoing integrative care? What does that look like on a state level? And how are we helping clients that may need additional care? I think that's something that we're still working through, and we'll have to in Oregon in Colorado as well, but really ensuring that folks who need kind of that longer tail of interaction and engagement, right, ensuring that they have access to various points for that, whether that be through the program or through third-party entities. And then finally,
I'm so glad you're mentioning that. I'm going to actually pause there, because
yeah,
huge part of our model has been teaching psychedelic harm reduction and integration work, which any therapist could provide, regardless of whether or not they were the provider of the psilocybin session.
yeah.
And so for people who want to get involved, but may feel that it's not the place for them to dive into being a facilitator, maybe even given all the support that is out there, doing the training program and working with Schedule I substance is just not your jam. We totally understand that. Getting trained in harm reduction and integration work gives you the skills and tools you need to still work with people who are going through facilitation with a licensed facilitator. And you can now you can more easily make those referrals to somebody who's licensed in your community. But you could be that person that provides maybe the ongoing or longer term support in partnership with that other provider. And I think that's a really, really important thing for folks to recognize, that you can have an incredibly positive impact and be so amazingly helpful here without being a psilocybin facilitator. Like, that's one way of getting involved, but it's not the only way. It's not exclusive, right? So in a team-based approach, there's room for that, and that's it's a program that we've been teaching since really it was like our founding program, right? Our sort of key program, but it's still a very important part of the ecosystem, because our philosophy has been, well, even if it's available within service center settings or even by prescription, right? Say we have a an FDA approval at some point, there's still going to be people for whom other settings are more appropriate, or they want to do this on their own. And in Colorado, you also have this model of gifting, which is separate from facilitation, or can be done in more informal settings. But people who are trained in integration work can be immensely helpful there as well.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a really good point, Elizabeth. And something I've always appreciated about what you're doing at Fluence is that harm reduction piece, and about really looking at the whole ecosystem and trying to train against, not necessarily just the facilitation, but what does that wrap around, and what is that team that's needed in order to provision these services and ensure folks get the best care they can. And I think also for those who may be worried about the legality of facilitation, right? That doesn't mean that you're negated from participating in this. I think you made a great point. There is the need for, and I think in the future, what we may see is more of this kind of referral kind of quality to it, where it is about preparation and integration and referring out to a facilitator, right? Where there is a team practice. Yes, that can be one individual who's doing the different aspects, as well as an area where maybe, we have a team where the clinical practitioner is maybe only doing prep or integration and not the facilitation. For whatever reason that may be, there is the ability for folks to participate with maybe not getting so in the weeds with the Schedule I substance or the legality of providing the facilitation services.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, it's going to take a full community. I think that at this point, all mental health care providers, really all healthcare providers, should have some training and orientation towards what psychedelic medicine is and how these things work, so that they can sufficiently have a basic conversation with people. To do otherwise is no longer becoming, it's becoming no longer acceptable.
Right.
So let's talk, maybe we could shift to talk a little bit about Colorado. It's an evolving landscape, as we like to say, and to use a gentle term for the situation. And I think what we mean by that is there are a lot of changes. Things are up in the air. There have been changes in terms of the specific regulations, the specific expectations of training programs. There have been, things that are like, we're tracking expectations in terms of changing expectations about how many people might enroll, what the projected sort of number of facilitators is going to be. I'll say a couple of things from my perspective. I'm involved in helping to see our program through this process of getting created and approved there. Although I'm not so much in the weeds on this one as I was in the Oregon program, but I do know that you've got a structure where there's a number of hours of training. I believe it's 120 hours, and then a practicum, and then some post-licensure consultation that is required, or some provisional licensure, and then a consultation that's required. So it's a pretty robust training program. It's a commitment. It's certainly a new scope of practice, a new profession, a new license for people, and it's a serious endeavor to really sign up for. Within that field, programs like ours, we're not running our own practicum programs. It's just not something that we do as an education organization. We're going to be partnering with local organizations to run those practicums. Other programs may have practicums in-house, which, if you want, the particular practicum they offer, that could be helpful, but you would probably be, having to go through that particular practicum with that program. So there's just going to be a range of options. But one thing that I think is really important to point out in terms of the difference is that right off the bat, as far as my understanding is, and what I think the current regulations are, there won't be any restriction on out-of-state licensees. So Oregon had it set up such that the first 2 years, which were 2023 and 2024 of the program, so we're almost at the end of 2024, you had to be a resident of Oregon in order to apply to be a facilitator. You could do the training, but you couldn't get the license unless you had 2 years of residency, going back 2 years. So unless you knew you wanted to do this from day one and you moved to Oregon in January of 2020, you were, going to need to wait, or January of 2021, you would have needed to wait until this restriction lifted, which is going to be next month, or in a month and a few days. We're now in November 2024. And so we haven't really seen what sort of an impact that's going to have in terms of the number of facilitators, maybe facilitators coming in and working on from out of state, working on a part-time basis, or people who are just moving there specifically to take up this work and this career. And I know there's, I think it's 300 and change facilitators that have currently been licensed to date. And that number reflects in part that restriction. Britt, do you have any sense of how that's expected to shift post 2025, and or how the difference might impact things in Colorado?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting things at play here when it comes to licensure and the states. First of all, with Oregon being the first to open up, there was no reciprocity of licenses because there was no other state. So basically, the way it stands in Oregon is that you must be licensed in Oregon by a facilitation program, by a facilitator licensing program or a training program. In order to get that license, you won't be able to be licensed in Colorado and then work in Oregon. And that's due to how the regulations were set up. However, in the future, we hope that there is that reciprocity available to work both ways. One of the things I think when we look at Colorado and we look at Oregon, Colorado has set up kind of two different levels of licensure. We have clinical facilitators and non-clinical facilitators, where Oregon does not distinguish between those. Oregon has made it just one facilitator model and really just focused on that. I think that as we're looking towards Colorado and the opening of Colorado, there are a number of differences between these two programs and how they're being set up. And I think that, there's a lot to be learned as we move forward of, which of these models is, not only safest or most accessible, but also which one is really functioning at the way that we all hope and intend for it to. And so, I think that one of the things that folks should think about as they are moving into this space is not only about where they're getting their license, but, how are they going to practice? Because say that you are working or you are out of state, say you're coming in from New Jersey or Georgia or some other place, you won't be able to practice in your home states, even if you do get licensed in, say, Colorado as a facilitator, because it's not legally available in other states outside of that. So again, it's one of the aspects of this that's important to recognize is the locality in which you're practicing is always going to be really important. And it's important to recognize that this is, these training programs, although they could be valuable and valid for underground practitioners or even those working, say, in ketamine or elsewhere, these are really, for the most part, set up to function as training programs for individuals to practice in the states in which they were licensed. And so I think that's really important for folks to recognize. I think when it comes down to it, though, one of the biggest pieces that individuals coming into this should recognize is that this is a new, I think you nailed it on the head. This is a new profession. This is a new license that's outside of your medical license. And even in Colorado, where they will have clinical facilitators, you can think of your medical license as a prerequisite to obtain that clinical. It does not act as your medical license now covers you to participate in psilocybin. It is a secondary license that has the prerequisite of your medical license. And that's really important because you aren't operating necessarily under your, the medical license, as it were. You're operating as a facilitator under your facilitator license. And that's the same regardless if you're a clinical facilitator or just a facilitator in Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now would be a great time to comment on maybe the insurance landscape and how do you see like NPA's role in helping specifically with malpractice insurance, right? Because that's a big concern. Are clinicians going to need an entirely different malpractice insurance policy? Is there a policy that NPA can help provide? Would that policy cover there other clinical work? How do you see that kind of playing out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's the truth of the matter is we're navigating this on a day-to-day basis. And the truth is that insurance currently is very, very much not available in a lot of ways to those operating in this space. So to break that down, if you are a medical licensed participant and you're looking to become a facilitator and you have medical license for your or medical insurance, or you have malpractice insurance for your medical license, that is not applicable here. You will need a whole new insurance policy to cover the work, regardless if you are a clinical facilitator or just a regular facilitator. Both will require new insurance because, like I said earlier, this is a new license set. And so everything you do in this program falls under that license, and that license is not associated with your medical insurance, medical malpractice insurance. And so this will require new policies regardless of who's participating. Right now, though, to be honest, there aren't very many carriers of malpractice insurance. One of the carriers who was early on participating in the Oregon market has recently announced that it will be dropping out. And that's due to numerous facts with their other lines of business, not necessarily have anything to do with Oregon's program. But the point of this is that it's really hard to get insured in this category. And that's because of the Schedule I substance being deployed. That makes it really hard for traditional players in the insurance markets to want to participate here. And therefore, it makes it difficult to secure these types of policies. Currently, the NPA is working on what we call an association captive insurance program. And when we are able to fulfill on this program, we will be able to provide licensees with malpractice, with general liability, and other insurance policies they need to not only cover themselves, but also to ensure they themselves as individuals are never at risk of being being held liable with their personal assets in any kind of malpractice case. Because without insurance, you probably won't be as capitalized as you need to be, and therefore any of the protections you have as an individual when it comes to a business claim or a business case, without insurance, you will be liable as the individual and not just as a business. And that can have all kinds of different impacts on, you or your livelihood. And so insurance is a big deal, and it's an area that has not been cracked yet. And we are working on it actively, but it's part of the risk of starting something new and participating in a program that hasn't been seen before, right? There are additional risks like this that are going to have to be acknowledged and worked through. But insurance is going to be a big piece. And it's right now, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of options to find coverage.
Yeah. It's challenging. And of course, when there aren't a lot of options, there's, I think insurance people, insurance industry thinks about risk, right? And so if there's few policies, it means that there's few that are willing to take on that risk, and maybe it doesn't bode well for others thinking that it's a good idea. Nobody wants to be first to jump on that new area. But if others are demonstrating that it's possible, there's a possibility for more. So the hope is that by demonstrating that this is something that is insurable, maybe there will be other products out there. But it's not uncommon in professions for there really to be just a main couple of carriers that people use that are familiar with those professions and can best protect those professions. And then those resources are consolidated, because we're not talking about huge numbers of people here.
Right. And I think the other piece, I think you're right. Most professions, you only have a couple carriers who have been really pushing the main policies that folks are buying and that you're using for coverage. One of the pieces that's missing here is data, right? A lot of insurance policies, that's all based on historical data of how many claims versus how many incidents and what does that really payout look like. And because we have no historical data, there's no way to tell what the risk is here. And I think that's been a barrier for a lot of the insurance companies to get in on, is like, what kind of risk are we really carrying? We have no way of assessing that and no way of really understanding that without any historical data. Where we're able to come in is we're looking at proxy data from other similar types of care provisions and trying to make some assumptions of what that could look like from a risk perspective, such that way we can develop models that will allow us to ensure these licensees and provide policies that cover their work.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's a learning curve, but the organization can learn a lot, right?
Absolutely.
In terms of some of the, I'm going to switch gears for a second here, but in terms of just some of the community building work that I know you guys are doing, we have a couple of events coming up in Colorado, if I'm not mistaken. Do you have anything on the calendar that is like going to be helpful for folks to come out and meet with NPA or learn more about NPA? And I should say, I don't think I mentioned this in the beginning, as people were coming into the room, Fluence is we're sort of we have a partnership with NPA in terms of being providing continuing education courses to NPA members. So if you are a member of NPA, you're going to get a couple of our courses through that membership. And when we do, when NPA does events and things like this, you're highly likely to see Fluence program reps there as well. So, but I don't know what might be on the schedule yet for 2025 as we start to develop this field in Colorado. Do you have some ideas?
Yeah, no, that's exciting. It's exciting. So starting in Q1, January, February, March of 2025, NPA will be hosting a number of meetups in Colorado. Dates TBD, but we will make sure all those folks on this call get access to those dates. But the idea will be to be meeting in Colorado and pulling in our partners. So pulling in partners from First Citizens, pulling in partners from our merchant services, pulling in the other partners that you'll need to be, or that licensees will need to be successful. And we'll be hosting those most likely in Denver, Boulder, Breckenridge, and Aspen as kind of the first few points of contact where we'll be hosting these live in-person meetups. And the idea is really to help folks know not only what is NPA and what are the products and services that we provide, but really to understand what the ecosystem looks like and how they can be successful. So pulling forward our partners and other operators in this space to provide, the information needed as folks go into the on-ramp really for the Colorado market. Part of our memberships will be opening up for facilitators and service centers in Colorado starting in January, specifically starting to help businesses and individuals set up their practices and to get all of the services they need deployed and in place in advance of the market opening. So that way they can hit the ground running on day one. And so what that will look like is, as we head into 2025, getting you set up with your banks, with your merchant services, with homecoming and other critical infrastructure pieces that we found to be really essential for the provision of care.
Yeah, and all that business setup stuff it takes time, it takes energy, it takes persistence. Having done much of it myself in many different times over the years for different needs, I think, going to these educational sessions, learning about what services are available, what you might need, getting that consultation, just getting into that network is going to be really, really helpful for people and just meeting people. Like even if you come out to an event, maybe you just meet a colleague who is someone else who is going through the same journey as you that you can share notes with. That sort of networking is really, really critical. And so we very much support it. And I know that we don't have those dates yet, but when we do, some of our trainers and staff can come out and join at those events. So you can get to meet some of them live. Some of our leadership can be there as well. I'm not sure if I can personally be there, but I'll be there in spirit. Just hoping, to sort of keep everybody aligned with moving along, collaborating and helping each other. And although, in terms of our timeline, I anticipate, and again, we have not yet received our approval yet from DORA. We're in the process. It's been submitted. We're in the process of getting that. I anticipate that our timeline will be that our first graduates will be going through practicum towards the end of the summer or September, and graduating, finishing up before the end of the year, like third or fourth quarter 2025. That's a fairly short timeline if you're thinking about setting up an entirely new profession and business practice, right? You've got a lot of stuff to deal with in the meantime. Maybe you're setting up a new LLC, maybe you're getting insurance, a new bank account, a new website, new social media handles, and all of those things are things that you can be starting to think about what your plan is going to be if you're going into this profession, or if you're thinking about just doing harm reduction work with folks that are going through for licensed psilocybin services. You can be beginning those processes. So I want to prompt everyone, if you have questions, to please put them in the chat for us and or the Q&A. And I think Britt, is there anything else that you want to touch on before I sort of start sifting through the questions and digging up some topics from there?
Yeah, no, I think the one thing that I'm really excited about, and hopefully folks who are going to be working in the Colorado market are excited about, is this clinical license, right? This is different than Oregon, that to have a license set aside for clinical participants, meaning doctors, therapists, those from the medical community participating. And the reason that's important is because Oregon kind of separated out the therapeutic component and really wanted to focus on this about not being a medical service, right? That way it could live separate from kind of any of the issues that may be entwined with, medical care versus the psilocybin services. In Colorado, having the ability to be a clinical facilitator provides a level of coverage. Now, is it complete protection for your medical license and your ability to continue practicing under your medical license? I can't say that for sure it is, but it's gone to greater lengths to help protect those who are, kind of participating in the medical sphere to feel comfortable operating in the psychedelic license practice as well. And so really excited to see how that shapes out and what that looks like as the market opens up.
Okay. Well, let's turn to some of these questions. We've got one about New Jersey. And I know there are efforts going on in New Jersey, and I see at least another name here of somebody I know is involved there. So the question is, does NPA anticipate serving New Jersey as psilocybin approaches legalization there? Could you just give us a minute on what the status there is and what NPA might be able to, how NPA might be involved, or if New Jersey facilitators would be eligible?
Absolutely. So the way that the NPA has constructed its business and its membership services is to be applicable to any state that opens a psychedelic assisted care market. So whether it be Oregon or Colorado, all of our partners that we have chosen to work with operate in all 50 states. So as soon as this becomes legal in a state like New Jersey, or had it become legal in Massachusetts in the election earlier this month, we are prepared to enter those markets as soon as they become legal. And so, yes, if New Jersey is the next market to open, we will be on the ready to meet them where they're at and provide these same services to facilitators and service centers in that market as well. It just, we kind of wait and see when the market's open. And as soon as there has been either a ballot measure or a legislative move to open a new state market, we're already prepared to serve those.
Amazing. Amazing. I've got a question here from someone who, this is, I think, coming from a psilocybin program grad of ours, about whether or not NPA can assist members with marketing and awareness of best practices and campaigns in Colorado. And I see the other question too. I'm going to get to that next. But given that there's some restrictions on promoting psychedelic substances from the state, and we just generally know that marketing using the words about psychedelics can be challenging in itself, where many organizations in our field have had their Facebook accounts pulled or their Instagrams canceled and things like that. So does NPA have marketing support?
Absolutely. I'm glad that you asked. This is something that I kind of hold dear to my heart, coming from pharmaceutical marketing and that regulated environment, and applying those learnings here. We are currently, just to take a step back, what we noticed out of the gate as the market started shaping in Oregon was around 70% for most service centers, 70% were coming from out of state. And that tells us a lot. That says that basically there is a great need to not only educate the general population, but the residents of the states in which these markets are opening. And so currently we are working on developing campaigns to raise awareness of these programs that not only meet the state regulations around communications and marketing, but also fall in lines with things that we'd be able to say nationally, right, under the FEC or in any other governing body, to ensure that we aren't promoting things in a way that is going to get us into trouble. And so that's a really tough line to navigate because of what you can and cannot say, what you can and cannot promote, and then how you distribute information, right? And to ensure that it is only being distributed, marketed only to those over the age of 21, only to those who are, available or eligible to participate in these programs. And so that makes it very tough to navigate. So we will be launching actually a awareness program for Oregon starting in January, and then we'll be doing the same for Colorado as that market opens and becomes more mature, to help ensure that folks both in state and out of state know about these programs. A little funny bit of info, we recently found out that only 18% of Oregonians really know about the Oregon Psilocybin Services program. Even though 54% of Oregonians voted for the program, only around 18% really understand or know that it is there and available to them. And so that means that we have a great deal of groundwork to do to help ensure not only those who are in the states where these are located, but those throughout the U.S. are aware of these programs and understand their services.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for elaborating that. It's really important as a public education campaigns, right? It's easy for people to sort of not buy into or not support something that they don't understand or know much about, but that kind of public awareness, public education is really, really important. I want to get to a question that we had about practicums, and again, this is coming from somebody who's asking how we're going to support required supervised practicum hours for students who already have gone through an Oregon program hours, or could be another one. If this is a significant additional requirement in Colorado versus Oregon for licensure. I'm not sure. My understanding, and Britt, you may have this better than I do, that my understanding is that Colorado is accepting people who are already licensed in Oregon, but that is not vice versa. Can you elaborate a little bit on reciprocity, and then I'll talk about our practicum plans?
Yeah, so right now, like I said earlier, Oregon does not have reciprocity. Oregon was the first state, and so it was kind of hard to see that far out in front of our skis to know that, yes, reciprocity is going to be needed here, being the first state to come online. And so, yes, I believe, and I'm not a lawyer, so please don't hold me to this, but I do believe that the reciprocity does work from Colorado to Oregon, just not in the reverse. At a point in the future, our hope is that there will be a legislative or regulatory push to allow for that reciprocity, but it just wasn't established from the onset in Oregon's market.
So if somebody, so there's two things, right? There's recognizing the education to apply directly for a facilitator license in Colorado is one path. And then there's reciprocity, which would mean getting licensed in Oregon and having that license be recognized in Colorado.
Yeah.
Do you know that either of those is the path that Colorado is accepting?
I actually do not. I apologize. Like I do not know for sure if that is available.
It's a changing landscape, right? It's like sometimes we don't, multiple things are discussed, but nothing has fully been decided yet. I will say that Department of Regulatory Affairs, right, DORA, is the Colorado source for this information. So if you go, and I really encourage everybody to go straight to the source, because we're good sources, but this webinar is a point in time, things change. It's always good to be getting the information directly from the source, the regulatory agency. So go to the Natural Medicine Health Act pages on DORA's website. It's very easy to Google. It comes up in searches very easily, and read their documentation. send your questions direct to them. They do have live sessions where people can go and ask questions or get feedback and contact information. And that's a great question to say, hey, I did my training in Oregon. Can I apply directly for a license with you? What other requirements are there? Or do I need to get licensed in Oregon and then you treat it as reciprocity? These are still things that, we're all working out and navigating. And they may have not been completely firmed up yet. So good thing to reach out to ask. What I can say about Practicum is that as an organization, Fluence, our focus is on education. And we're going to be partnering with a couple of local organizations that are actually well established in running similar retreat style practicum training programs. So I don't have those partnerships to share today, but when we have our, when we get our anticipated approval from DORA and we're able to post the program, we'll be able to share who those partners are, what their dates are. And the cost structure will be such that there is a program fee for the program, and then there is a practicum fee for the practicum, and those are separate. They will be documented and announced together, so you'll be able to see the whole thing, but the practicum fee will go directly to the practicum partner. Okay, so look out for more information about that really soon. And for those of you who are here, if you're not already on our waiting list to find out more, everything will be in our general emails as well, but these kinds of details, if you want to check out, get your name on our very specific waiting list for this, you're welcome to submit it there, letting us know that you're interested in this program. It's helpful for us to see too, like, that you're interested, so we can add you to that. Let me ask one more question from the or two actually from the Q&A before we get to the end of our time here. This is a question about health insurance, and will health insurance reimburse for psilocybin services as out-of-network services? And I believe this is more likely in Colorado if those services are provided by somebody who is a licensed clinician. And is there any precedent for this in Oregon? Is this anticipated to be something that's functional in Colorado if somebody is working with a licensed provider?
Yeah, so currently health insurance is not set to cover psilocybin services in Oregon, and most likely at this point not in Colorado either. What we are hoping is that there will be insurance coverage of this in the future, and we're starting to see headway in that area. So a really important group that folks should look into is Enthea. They are helping to put psilocybin services, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, and other types of psychedelic-assisted care into employee benefit packages. And so I think that's going to be the first foray into any type of health insurance or kind of health-related reimbursement of these services. Most likely will be through an employee benefit plan before you'll see it on any national health insurance code or policy. So, and that's due to the fact, again, this being a Schedule I substance, and it's hard to navigate some of those areas within the medical community, let alone the health insurance community, and helping them understand what these services are. So out of the gate, most likely these will not be covered under any of the health insurance plans. But that is an area that we hope to get to in the future as these become more available, because we know that is one of the few ways we're going to make this affordable for more people than just those who can pay out of pocket, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000.
And Enthea, just to piggyback on that, Enthea is a great small organization, right? We've known them for several years. We have Fluence also has a partnership with Enthea, and people who are becoming ketamine assisted psychotherapy providers within Enthea's network can receive a discount on our CAP training program, which is excellent. And Enthea can be out there talking to employers in Colorado, getting them on board with offering this as an employee benefit. So even though that's not the same as health insurance coverage, it could still be a benefit that some employers offer. And that's what does. They do it as just an additional benefit that employers can offer. I saw there's a mention also of the CPT code. There is a CPT code for psychedelic therapy sessions, for being present during a psychedelic therapy session. I don't know that it would necessarily be applicable under the state licensure models. It may need to be in a medical care setting, like with an FDA approved drug. And unfortunately, just because there's a CPT code doesn't mean something gets actually reimbursed. It just means that it can be documented as a service. And then sometimes after some time, there's studies of how often that code is used and how it's used. And then insurers get on board with using it. So the fact that there isn't an FDA approval for psilocybin for a specific indication is really what would be hindering reimbursement from traditional health insurers in a large scale way. Just perfectly kind of frank about that. All right, so we got just a minute left, and let's see. I want to answer this one more question, which is from somebody who's asking about whether or not clinicians can provide coaching across state lines as something that's not therapy around around psychedelic prep and integration. And so for those who may not be familiar with this, if you are a licensed clinician, you have a scope of practice, you also have a jurisdiction in which you are licensed to practice that profession. I am a licensed psychologist in the state of New York. I can practice psychology in the state of New York, not in New Jersey, not in Colorado, not in Oregon, not anywhere except the state of New York. If I'm seeing somebody as my client, my patient, they have to be in the state of New York. I could be virtual working from elsewhere, but my patients have to be in New York. That's how licensure and jurisdictions work. There are reciprocity agreements. There are there are all kinds of ways that people who are licensed in one jurisdiction can get recognized to be able to either temporarily or permanently practice within another jurisdiction, but you do actually have to go through that process usually. A couple sessions if your patient's on vacation sometimes is allowable, but you really need to make sure that you're licensed in the jurisdiction that you're working. My understanding conservatively from talking with attorneys who specialize in this over the years is that if you're being conservative and protecting your license, no, you can't just take your hat off and say, now I'm practicing coaching for psychedelic integration in another state where I'm not licensed, because sort of like once a clinician, always a clinician. So having two categories of professional services and trying to distinguish them and trying to say, this is this, that is that, is tricky and potentially risky. It may be different if it was something that looked very different, like, you are a practicing psychotherapist and you are also a practicing acupuncturist or something like that, right? It's pretty distinguishable, and you have separate business for those things. But the conservative answer is no. Are there people doing this? Yes. Can they get great training and sometimes provide very important, helpful services? Sure. But I always encourage people to check out the licensure laws, the jurisdictions, really talk to your, make sure that, your malpractice insurance will cover you for what you're doing. That sort of stuff is really important. And we know folks who've had challenges because of things like this. So we want you to stay safe out there. We care about you. And please, do your homework, get educated, and then determine what's the right path for you in terms of the risk you're ready and willing to take on. Okay. We've covered a ton of ground here today. Thank you so much, Britt. We are at the end of our time. It's been stellar as usual.
As always.
And yeah, everybody, you're on our mailing list now. So you will hear from us with the recording and other updates. All right.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.